a.m., 11 p.m. Central European Time. Good to be here. Wherever this catches you in the morning, afternoon, or evening, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to show up. Good evening to you, Mr. Bogfoot. Hope that you are doing well. Hope you had a good weekend, sir. Good to see you as always. Um, yeah, let's see here. Looks like everything is lined up here. Yeah. All right. Yeah, guys. Welcome to the Upstairs to Right Music channel. I am your host, Mike McWilliams, and we discuss all things gear related. Sometimes we even get into some other non gear related things, but all around the music industry, we try to stay within that realm generally. And I hope you enjoy that kind of talk because we've got plenty of it tonight. Mr. Watson, how are you doing this evening? Good to see you. How are you doing? Yeah, guys. What can I say? I want to watch the Warren Beatty Dick Tracy, but I'm always disappointed by it. The one with Madonna. Um, I think I remember when that came out, and I think that honestly speaking, Madonna was the biggest draw to that movie, and because supposedly her and Warren Beatty were seeing, that old Hollywood crap. But that was probably the most interesting thing that came out of that movie. I agree. Ben, how you doing? Welcome. All right. Well, I think that this week, a lot of stuff, a lot of topics going on YouTube. Um, Honestly speaking, one of the biggest topics that I saw this week was people talking about the fact that, especially Red Shaw. I think Red Shaw kind of kicked it off when he came out with a video a day or so ago talking about how he felt that digital maulers, no matter how nice they are, was his premise, I believe, that they will not last the test of time, that they will become obsolete. Whereas tube amps, even ones from the late 60s and early 70s, those will always remain non obsolete and always ready to go. And I think Tommy Mack, welcome, sir. How you doing? Good to see you, Tommy. And I first of all, just to address that, I think most people will agree is that I used a Zoom 606 pedal uh, from Kyrgyzstan. Welcome. How you doing, MB? Welcome. Welcome to the live show. Thank you so much for showing up, sir. Um, and that was an old at the time that I used it to record. I used that for a recording for my song The Sower. The guitar solo on that's not a tube amp or anything fancy like that. That's a Zoom 606 pedal. It's a little gray pedal. I got it over here. It finally gave up the ghost. But you know, uh it sounded terrific. And to be frank with you, if I could get it repaired, I would do that. And that leads to another point about that discussion about amps being better than modern modelers is that that's assuming that that tube amp is not going to blow out because tube amps blow out, uh, that you're going to be able to be in the position to repair it or be able to afford to have it repaired, be in a position to afford to have it repaired somewhere down the line in the future. My point is that whether it's a tube amp, a solid state amp, or a digital modeler, it doesn't matter. As long as it functions on its own and it doesn't need software updates in order to make it function, in the case of the modelers, then it should rock on forever, much like that 606. That 606 was old when I used it. So I think it was from the 90s, the late 90s. And so, honestly speaking, his premise is quite incorrect. And DJ Martinez, hey, how you doing, DJ Martinez? Welcome to the house. Amir from Iran, hey, welcome. Glad to have everybody here, an international crowd we are having here tonight, to be sure. Glad to be here with all you guys. I didn't start out by saying this that time is a valuable thing, and for you to spend a little bit of yours with me, I always open up saying is a greatly appreciated thing. So, wherever you're at in this world, morning, afternoon, or evening, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Yeah, I just got that. I just got that Pocket Master, which is probably one of the best, inexpensive modeling devices out on the market right now. And I'm still putting it through its tests, and I'm completely satisfied with it. I have no issues with it whatsoever. Uh, do I think that that's going to be working 10 years from now? If I treat it nice and the lithium battery is of any quality, and then yes. When that lithium battery dies, will it be able to be replaced? Probably not. But still, in all, there's a good chance that it could still be working 20 years from now as well. You just don't know. And also, in the case of like that 606, that didn't have any kind of battery. That was actually, you could put batteries in it. So something like that, unless its internal circuitry gets bad, which, by the way, speaking of repairing my tube amp MP, I've been using this for decades to record with. I fired it up the other day, and there's something wrong with it. It's finally started to malfunction. And this is something that I've had for going on almost 2 decades now. So I've got to locate somebody who can fix that. I'm in the middle of a major European city, and even something like that is a difficult thing to find. To be sure, I knew the one good guy in town, and he completely stopped. He just when these Dutch guys quit, there's no, hey, could you do this as a favor for me? They're like, nah, I'm done. So if you live in a rural situation and you've got a tube amp and it blows out, what are you going to do unless you can repair it yourself? See, the premise just in itself that digital modeling gear somehow is going to become obsolete is not true. It's only going to be as good as you take care of it, also as good as it's manufactured. So there's that. Um, Amir says, "Can you tell me what you're talking about? My English is not good." Scott. Mike, is your gain low or is it me? I don't know. Let's see. Let's turn it up. Let me know, Scott, if that's better. Um, Let me guys know if the sound is better. I appreciate it. I just turned it up a little bit. We'll see if it works. So that premise just by itself is just really just kind of off. I'm just not buying it. Sasa, good evening from Amsterdam, Netherlands. Well, I'm in Amsterdam right now, so hello, neighbor. Coming up just 8 past 11 here. Yeah, that premise just by itself kind of just doesn't work for me. So there's that. But what I did take from that conversation was something down in the comments section that somebody said. Somebody wrote, "I don't understand people that sell limitations as a benefit." Yeah, Amir, love you too, brother. Thank you so much for taking the time to show up. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I thought that to be an interesting statement. This guy was basically, because on Rich channel, most people lament the fact that here's this guy with a room full of equipment, which I thought was the reason why most people watch that channel in the first place. To be honest with you, to walk at whatever new piece of gear that guy has. It's just as a side note. I was thinking about that when I was watching the video, reading those comments, that I have to admit that this full-on studio thing, like you see some of these YouTubers like Red Shaw have, is relatively new. When I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, very few people had studios like that. I knew that amount of equipment. That was not the norm. So one thing that I wonder, is that the norm now? Is it normal to have that amount of equipment? Because one of the guys that I knew who was an old producer from Motown, and Oh, this is how messed up. This is one of the reasons why I should put at the end of tonight's discussion why minimalism sometimes is better for you. I knew a Motown producer, got older guy that I met through my mentor Reggie Andrews, is one of his contemporaries, and we went to go see him in the hospital because he had cancer. And we went to go visit him, and he was sitting up in bed. And we were talking to him, hey, how you doing? How you feeling? Everything. Oh, the doctor says, it might be better. I might be getting out of here. And could you go over to my studio and do such and such? So he had a recording studio. So Reggie got the key from him. He went to the recording studio. He took a few things out and took it over to his place. But for the most part, he just took those few things and he left. The guy died that night. That night he died. And Reggie told us about a week later that somebody went to his house, went to his studio, and all that stuff was gone. Relatives, things of whoever just went in. The whole place was just stripped clean. So, that in itself is something that I wonder because the only guys I knew that had that Rhett Shaw level equipment were much older, much older. But this statement, I don't understand people that sell limitations as a benefit. That's one benefit right there. Everybody's thinking about the present, the here and now. But I have to say that, think in the long run too. So tonight's discussion is why minimal is best, cutting through the gear clutter. I want to answer that guy's question. I am one of those people who, as he puts it, sells limitations as being a benefit. And he says he doesn't understand why. Well, I've opened up with one very good reason you can't take it with you. And I'd like to kind of pound on that a little bit and expound upon that a little bit with you guys tonight in this live stream, this podcast. And tell you what I really mean by this, what this means. Now, I know a lot of people don't watch this all the time live, but if you catch this in the rerun, I would really appreciate it if you leave a note down in the comment section and say, I watched the rerun. Now, let me know how many people are actually watching. My YouTube algorithm tells me there's a lot of people lurking, ducking in and out in the background there. So just hit a note down in the comment section for me. Let me know you stopped in. Anthony, good evening, sir. How are you doing? So good to have you here, Mr. Thornhill. Sometimes minimalism isn't a limitation. It actually, in my opinion, is the clearest and cleanest path to creating music. So tonight I want to unpack a little bit about how minimalism in music gear can save a couple of things: money, you can sharpen your creativity, and strip away the noise. You know, one of the things that I've thought about is maybe in my case, because I've moved countries 4 times in my lifetime. And that's not counting the initial move from the United States to Japan. I guess 5, I guess, technically. I don't really count that. But in any case, I haven't been able to, a rolling stone, they used to say, gathers no moss. And so I've had to live a minimalist lifestyle. I've had to shed a lot of things. I suppose pretty much if I stayed in the States that I could probably have just a huge, studio full of stuff acquired over time. But that was not meant to be for me. So I had to learn how to, because making music for TV commercials was what I was getting paid for. So I had to learn how to make the most out of a rig that in a moment, a heartbeat, notice that I would have to tear down and move on to some place else to know that when I got to that someplace else that I would be able to do that. I think that was the birth of my minimalism, is just that. I'm sure, actually positive, because my good friend Jock, he's accumulated quite a few things. Um, I'm pretty sure that that would have been the case, but would that have helped me musically? No, because I was able to achieve more, I think, with less than if I had a whole room. Brands spend less as premium, one knob pedals, stripped down amps, back to basic DAWs. But are they charging us more for less, or are they onto something? I get back to that new boss pedal that I talked about last live stream. Strip away the noise figuratively or literally. Probably a little bit of both. I think it's a 50-50 on that one. And by the way, guys, how is my volume now? Let me know. I never got a check back feedback on that. Has it improved? Trying my mic again. Try to get a little bit more clarity here, but if it's not working, we'll ditch it. That boss pedal is pretty minimal. It's got three knobs and an LED screen. And that is a design that I think a lot of stuff is going forward with. And it led me to think about that question: are they charging us more for less, or are they onto something? Um, you know, I really think that minimalism, when it comes to gear, the reason I bring that up is your individual pieces of gear may not be the best thing. If you have to go through a bunch of sub menus and click a bunch of things in order to get to where you want to get to, that's not a great thing. So when I speak of minimalism, I'm not talking about the actual gear that you get. That can be as simple or complex as you so desire. I'm talking about the overall amount of gear that you have acquired and what is necessary in your studio and what is not. Stripping away the noise, both literally and figuratively, because trust me, if you can get your pedal board to function better with less pedals, those little individual points of noise input it diminishes. So you have a cleaner sound as well. While a lot of cats back in the day in the recording studios, they would plug directly into the console. That was the best, cleanest sound. So there is that. Um, so just to make those definitions clear before we go on here, is that again, like I said, I don't think that minimalism with the actual piece of gear is such a great thing. I've still got this 606 here, so I'll take it out. One of the things about these, yes, and I still have everything in the box, but just that kind of guy. But I like the fact that you have your tone, your levels, you have all of your functionalities here at your fingertips. You don't have to go into any sub menus. You don't have to click this in order to do that special sub menu thing that you want to do. No, it's all up front. Hey, welcome there from Russia. I assume from the language there. Hello. You can pretty much will assume that everything you need here is up front, and those are one of the advantages about analog. Um, so again, I'm not talking about minimalism with your gear. I prefer knobs and things of that nature to turn with the gear that I do have because honestly, I don't like things that have sub menus and things. I do the Pocket Master. My one and only gripe with that, if I was to use it other than any other function than what I'm using it for, that could be a little tedious. But as I've got it set. It acts as a cabinet only. It's a digital cabinet, and that works. But I still have to have my analog pedals in order to make those tweaks. So workflow. Some people think that fewer knobs equal fewer distractions. And with fewer distractions and fewer knobs, this equates to more time playing and less time tweaking. Um, and again, that's why I opened up making that kind of distinction because, you know, I think the opposite. Um, you know, at least in terms of quantity of music, not the knob things. I'm bringing it up just to be fair in this argument because that can be a limitation in my mind as well with your gear. But I think that with knobs and things of that nature, that not necessarily that can slow you down, because most guys, when they set their gear, they set their pedals, they pretty much have it the way that they like it. Not too many people are down there twisting and turning things. Most of the action at that point, you're getting switching between your pickups and your volume, your tone on your guitar. Once that's kind of set, other than switching in between pedals, or I just, I'm using pedals as an example, but amps could be the same thing. Once you set an amp, most of your functionality is going to come there from your pickups, and your five-way, three-way, or whatever kind of switch you have on your guitar. So boundaries, I believe, force you to dig deeper into your technique. In other words, I don't have that brand new shiny thingamajig in order to make this sound. So what do I have around here? What can I do in order to try to make that sound? And I think that that's one thing. Let me catch up here in the chat. Broadcast sounds good to me. Tommy Max says, thank you, Tommy. Cat's Music Journey, welcome, sir. How are you doing? I hope you had a nice weekend. The weather here was fair to middling, but it was all right. That's why I like analog pedals and knobs on my car. Yeah, it's just personal preference, easier for me. Well, I grew up with that, to be I'm an old guy, so that's all we had. And I do prefer that. And of course, this discussion about minimalism in the form and construction of the gear that we're talking about doesn't just limit ourselves to our music equipment. It extends out to a lot of stuff. But again, I'm arguing that you can have a pedal that's got 50,000 knobs on it. That's fine if that's your one pedal. If you've got 20 pedals that have 50,000 knobs on it, that's where I'm saying you're going to run into some issues. So the gear that you have should be as flexible as possible, but as minimal as possible. And why is that? Workflow. Simple setups are faster for recording and live. At the end of the day, it's about workflow. You know, I find it amazing that so many musicians, like David Gilmour was being interviewed. It was pointed out, and David Gilmour is still using Zoom pedals from the '90s. He hasn't gotten into any digital modeling or anything like that. His stuff is super old school, and I still bet you. And it's because it's so easy workflow for him too. He knows it. He's known it for 30 years now. And if that is not the best kind of the familiarity that you want to build, is the next part of this that I'm leading up to here. The reason he uses that pedal, those pedal Zoom pedals, is because he knows it. He knows what to expect out of it. Jimi Hendrix had said would buy up as many fuzz pedals as he could get because he felt that some of them sounded better than others, and also if one broke, he always had a spare. It was super easy for him to swap those out, and he knew how to use it. He knew the settings he wanted on it. End of story. And hey, Ellie. Hey, sweetie. Ellie's here, guys. Want to say hello? Come on, come say hello. Hey, say hello to everybody. Yeah, this is Ellie. This is our studio cat, Ellie. Say hello. All right, let me let Ellie out, guys. She has taken my old friend Mr. TJ's place as a studio cat. Jimmy's fuzz faces were modified. Yeah, I do believe that his tech had done some work on them, but he would still buy as many of them as he could. So there's that. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Good. 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 No sound is good. Um, Workflow, simple setups are faster for recording live. I really, really do believe that. If I walked into Red's studio the way that he presents it on TV, on YouTube, uh, and was asked, to record something, I probably would not use 99% of the things that he has in that room. I'm just being honest with you. I look around that room and there's a lot of things that are in doubles and triplicates, A lot of it's redundant. So getting rid of your redundancies will help your workflow. Um, Owning fewer but better tools stretches your budget further. His argument that the quad cortex is going to be obsolete in 10 years is invalid because it's a very expensive piece of equipment, A. And it's not going to be an expensive doorstop, although some stuff in the past has ended up being expensive doorstops, but I don't think the quad cortex will be. But because it's so well made, I think that if you bought one now used and you treated it nice, again, it's all predicated on treating your stuff nice. I've had this bad boy, like I said, almost 2 decades now, and this is the first time that it's crapped out on me. And I treat it really nice. So if you treat it nice, they will last. And again, his argument that tube amps will last longer is invalid because, again, if you blow out your amp, which I do believe tube amps do blow out. So, there's that. You know, there was a time when one pedal, one guitar, and a small rig got you further than a complex chain. The only guys who had to have that amount of gear back in the day were the studio musicians, the guys who had to go into session players. They had to have, and I believe that, they were the ones that would tell you that if they could get away with less, they would have. They would happily have, just because of their chiropractic bill alone would would make them happy. But for us mere mortals, uh, that time when one pedal, one guitar, and one small rig got you further along, um, can be hard to focus on with all the options, all the ads, all the things that are being put upon your eyeballs to buy. And it can really not help you. It can not help you. Not all minimal gear is equal, because sometimes, um, just again, walking back and taking the opposite side of the argument, gear is gear, and sometimes cost cutting is just cost cutting. It's just corner cutting. That's why I said that the owning fewer but better tools stretches your budget further. So don't do minimal on the cheap if you can avoid it. Then cheap, by the way, does not equate necessarily to the value. It really speaks to the materials that were used, how and where you acquired it, the condition that it is in when you acquire things like that. Cheap practice amps or budget strip models aren't inspiring. They're just bare bones, and and so I would rather have a pretty decent mid-size amp that will last a long time if I'm going in that direction than a budget amp. So I'm not saying that don't equate minimalism with being thrifty. You can be minimalist, but have really nice gear. For example, you could buy the Quad Cortex Stadium, and pretty much, well, you could say that that would be the only piece of gear you would need for all of your recording, including your keyboards, your basses, everything. You would run everything through that. So, but you invested a lot up front, and but it's one piece and it does it all. So don't equate. Or on the opposite side, for you to, for those of us who aren't going to spend that kind of money, the individual pedals that we buy, like in my case, I've acquired them over time. Pedals is something that I could acquire because I could pack those up and take those. Um, Quality pedals, vintage pedals, things of that nature that you can use now. Um, that would be, and then couple that like I did with some pretty nice sound, a bit inexpensive digital mauling, and again you got the best of both worlds, but you've got a great sound. So, but you're not corner cutting. It's all quality gear still, um, but keep in mind you don't want to go too cheap. Learn to distinguish between intentional minimalism. So intentional minimalism, ooh, that's a tough one to say. Good design, in other words, and forced limitation, which is cheap design. You guys understand what I'm saying there? Um, Intentional minimalism, for example, like some of those Zoom pedals, for example, or some of these other ones that I have here. Um, they were intentionally designed to make it easier for the user to use, uh, but they were very thoughtful in design of it. It was a good design, as opposed to a force limitation of something cheap, like, for example, you know, you could run through your mind a cheap pedal or a cheap piece of gear, uh, that is a cheap design. It's it cut corners in order just to make it cheap, and one of the corners they cut was the design of it. So distinguish between those two and understand that minimalism goes wrong when you confuse those two. When you confuse those two, conflate those two. Multi-instrument musicians have it the worst. Yeah, tell me about it. My dad used to say we're too poor to buy cheap stuff. Thank you, Kat. So a very folksy and a very plain way of saying the same thing is that you know it just amazes me. Oh God, here we go on one of my digressions. But anyway, it amazes me how people filled up their homes with cheap Chinese stuff from Alibaba, from Temu, from places like that. You can get a few things from there, but the amount of money that I saw consumers, especially in the US, spending on that stuff over the last 5 years, particularly peaking during the pandemic when people couldn't go out, is astounding to me. And then they turn around and try to sell it in their garage sales. And they wonder why nobody's buying it. Well, because it's cheap stuff. Garage sales, good ones, back when I was younger, you went to it and there was some good stuff there, quality stuff. Now people are just selling all their cheap Chinese stuff. It's just again, don't buy cheap because you'll just find yourself in a situation where you're surrounded by cheap stuff that nobody wants. You There's a middle ground. There's a sweet spot, that I think that can be achieved. Uh, don't hoard, but don't starve. In other words, don't put yourself in a position where you've minimalized so much that you're actually missing something, um, that you need. Uh, but don't hoard either, to whereas you have so much stuff that, quite frankly, if you turned it all on, your electricity bill would be 10 grand a month. And that's another thing too. Electricity bills in some parts of the United States are skyrocketing. I don't know too many cats who can have a full blown recording studio running up unless they're billing at, $500 an hour in order to make up for the cost of the electricity alone. Again, another argument for minimalism is just the added cost to that equipment to run it. You know, there's that to consider. One guitar plus one pedal board plus one amp can do a lot more than you think. Again, nice guitar, nice pedal, and nice amp. And this idea of a capsule rig, like a capsule wardrobe, for example, for those of you who travel, um, they travel better, they work better. And but again, like I said, don't starve yourself. Don't have too many. Again, get the stuff that works. If you like it, buy two of them. I'm actually considering buying a second Pocket Master, not to put away. I'll keep it in its box just like all the rest of my pedals, and I will put it away. And if something happens to the one that I've got, guess what? For 50 bucks, I can pop that one out, pop that new one in, and keep trucking. See, I like what Hendrix was on there. I like his concept of buying a bunch of cheap pedals, but they weren't too cheap, but they were certainly affordable for him at that point in his career to get a few of those and put them away too. So you can double up on the stuff that you like as well as another option so that you can make sure that down the line, if you can afford to do so, and if it's affordable and it's of good quality. Again, we talked about that. But that's another thing that you can do. You know, even still by doing that, it would still cost less and honestly sound more authentic as well. You know, I would never buy a quad Cortex myself because I am just of the opinion, and I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong about this because I haven't really played through one, to be honest. I haven't. I don't. I've never played through one or Helix. I have never played through those. Similar things to those, like the Axe effects. Yes, I have. But I just don't. I think that just having that one unit by itself is pretty sterile. I think that you really couldn't sound. I just don't understand how you would get a unique sound out of that. You can sound good with it, but would you get a unique sound? I don't know. I just, again, think that if you want to sound more authentic, you've got to somehow learn how to make the digital modeling thing work with the analog and keep that minimal. And then I think you have a better chance of sounding like yourself and sounding authentic. But I may be wrong about that. That's just kind of one of my thoughts on that. I never come down on anyone for having bottom tier stuff, nor should you. Yeah, because one man's ceiling is another man's floor. But I really feel bad for YouTube guys that have 20 Amazon guitars but still feel unfulfilled. I know. But you know what, Scott? Those are the dudes who are new to YouTube too, and they feel that they've got to have something new every month, every week, or whatever in order to get views to produce content. So in order to do that affordably, what they do is they buy these cheap guitars, these Amazon guitars. And I just they're like, oh, this is great. And they turn around and then they look behind them and you got a whole stack of cheap guitars. It's like, you know, that nobody wants. That even if you said, hey, I'm gonna give you 5 of these guitars for $100, that'd be a hard sell. Even though you may spend 100, 150 per each one. So yeah, I dig that, man. I agree that yeah, I agree 100%. But that's just my theory. I think many of them, Scott says, would be happier with one or two dream guitars instead. I agree. I agree. I really do. You know, I just it's a good point. I think that when I see those, just don't do it. To feed the YouTube algorithm monster, you've got to get creative. You figure that out real fast when you start, especially a gear channel, regardless of what the gear is, golf clubs to, gizmos. It doesn't matter. You learn real fast that trying to get that churn going for YouTube is a bad economic model. So you better get real creative on other ways in order to create content other than buying the cheap guitar of the week or pedal or club, you know. So really don't hoard, but don't starve either. There's a sweet spot there. And I think that the key to that sweet spot is the quality of the gear that you have. Quality of the gear that you have. So that opening line, people selling limitations as a benefit. I don't understand people who sell limitations as a benefit. I don't understand people who, and again, I don't begrudge you if you want to have excess. That's your thing, and you can pay that bill. Then fine. I just think that I look at all the true creative people that I've met. I like to think that I'm one of them as well. Never once ever thought, boy, it'd be sweet to have a whole room full of equipment. What we thought is, boy, it would be sweet to have that guitar going through that amp, maybe or maybe not, or directly into that console, that kind of thing, but not a bunch of stuff, you know. You know, I knew guys who had one keyboard and one MPC 60. That was all they had. And they produced records that you're listening to, or R&B records that you're listening to from the 90s that you're listening to today. I know of I know that Brandy's album, her first album, Brandy Norwood, the singer, I know her first album was produced exactly like that. It was an MPC 60 and one keyboard, you know. Because you could do sequencing with the MPC 60, you do sampling with the MPC 60. So it was very easy. You could do your drums, you do all your stuff, and you could make a song with that, and then you fly that onto tape, and then you had to call the vocalist in, do your overdubs, and you're good to go. That's the system that I grew up in. That was in our minds. Whoa, did you hear that such and such produced that track with an MPC 61 keyboard? That was aspirational to us. Wow, I've got to get my pathways, my creative pathways to start thinking with less. And that's a true story. I just thought of that just now. That memory, clicked in my brain that's a true story. And I think that was one of the things that inspired me as a young producer as well. Minimalism has always been there. It wasn't just a traveling, methinks, in my case. It was there from the beginning. And when I saw people who had excess, I never saw anything good come out of it. I never did. I never did. You know, I remember this one guy, pretty good keyboard player. I thought pretty good writer. I thought he was going to get onto something, but he got married, and his wife, kind of put her foot down, and about him going out and doing it. But she let him buy stuff, and he had the nicest, studio back then. We were in college at the time. Jock and I, and my producer friend, Grammy nominated producer friend Jock Richmond, and I went over to his house at that time and looked around. Oh boy, this is nice. Oh, that's nice. Is that? Oh, you got the JX. Oh, that's great. Look at that. But it never left that room. So he found his satisfaction through a bunch of stuff, but it never left that room. Not a note ever left that room. Shame is a shame. But whether it's his wife, I'm sure played a part of that. But in any case, um, you know, nothing good ever came. None of the examples that I ever saw from people having excess. Anything ever really good came out of it, you know. So there is that. If you had to cut your entire rig down to three pieces, what would they be? So take a look around your room. Look at your stuff if it's around you or later on, and I'd like to know: have you gone through that mental exercise? If I had to make a choice right now, I had 2 minutes to decide. Okay, 5 minutes to decide which ones, which three I keep. Could you do that, Maddie? Hey, how you doing, Mister Two Hats? So good to have you here. Um, yeah, that original line selling. I don't understand people who sell limitations as a benefit. I can dig the opposite side of that coin. I've tried to give some counter arguments here as well, to be fair. However, I think minimalism isn't about selling less for more. It's about cutting through clutter and finding the gear that matters the most to you. What are the pieces that work for you? The ones that you can fire it up, and the minute you play a note, or you start playing the keys a little bit or whatever, can get you going. Equipment, of course, can be inspiring. Um, I just heard a producer. I like to talk about Prince a lot because he was the man. He was the one that I think everybody got that idea of minimalism back in the 80s from, because as I told you before, the man had not a lot of equipment, not a lot. But there's a story another producer talked about where he bought a Fairlight in. It was a brand new piece of equipment, the old Fairlight samplers, and he had a bunch of stuff already loaded in the studio. He said, "Oh, Prince, come over here and check out this Fairlight." And Prince started playing around with it, and he came across the sound like woof, 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 woof. He heard that sound, and he said that he immediately was inspired by that sound so much that that sound became the song Housequake. That boom, 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 and Housequake, that track, that's Fairlight, and that was inspired by that piece of equipment. Pieces of equipment is particularly keyboards, if your keyboards can inspire you. A guitar can as well, certainly. The feel of it, not necessarily just the sound of it, but the feel of it can inspire you. But again, these are the things that you're looking for. You know, music is, that woman that you've been dating for years, but for some reason, through song, she's able to change her looks always, and you're always looking for that next change of look. I guess that's kind of a rough analogy, but you guys understand what I mean. Cutting through the clutter, guys. At the end of the day. Cat said something there I was about to read, but he redacted it. I hope he puts that back up again. I'm glad I never got into pedal collecting. Damn things are like Pokemon. Yeah, dig that. I have two guitars, one amp and three pedals that do that. I plug any of them and they'll do the job. I have a ton of gear, but these are just me. Yeah, which means that all the other stuff you wouldn't necessarily miss if you got rid of it. The pedals that I have on my pedal board, and you can go back through my videos and see that I've had at one time, like, a ridiculous amount, dozens and dozens of pedals. But the ones that I have now are the ones that cut through everything else, and they work together too. Because sometimes pedals don't work so well together. Some of them can, not work. It's a funny thing. You'll discover that the more you have too. Talking about they're like Pokemon, but some of those Pokemon characters don't get along with each other. But I kept the ones that were that and identified my sound. That when I plug into those pedals, that's me. I know what to expect out of them too. Again, the familiarity. Oh, my tongue sometimes really is a benefit, and that is brought about by having a minimalist kind of frame of mind. And so I don't agree with, and most people didn't agree with Red Shaw's theory about modeling and amps and all those things. Um, I personally myself don't think that he's right either, as I started out by saying, but it opened up such an interesting discussion, and about what's really necessary and what's not. And I think for each and every one of us, it's a subjective thing. So what's good for me may not be good for Kat, may not be good for Scott, may not be good for Maddie and Michael and all you guys. Or there may be one thing that we can all kind of agree on works for us. But it is down to the individual. It is a subjective kind of thing. And the reason why a Prince album sounds like a Prince album is because the minimalist approach that he took, using the keyboards and equipment that he had in order to achieve a singular sound. Same reason why a Queen album sounds like a Queen album. Same reason why, a Dr. Dre album, for example, sounds like a Dr. Dre album. It's they're not using the latest and greatest thing. They may be using the latest greatest thing recording wise, but they're not using it in order to do their production work. They rely on the same gear, um, and gear has a sound to it as well, and it's tough. It's tough because we don't have the money to flow through all the pieces of gear to find out the ones that we like. Most of us can't do that. Pedals, again, like I said, kind of make that possible as long as you're not talking about $500, $600 guitar pedals. But as long as they're within the $100 to $150 range or less, then that is a discovery, a pathway that you can go down affordably to find a sound that works for you. But again, it's all subjective. So I do keep that in mind as well. I'm guilty of thinking who dies with the most gear wins. Yeah, Jock used to love to say that. That was one of Jock's favorite. That's why Jock has, and he practiced what he preached. Trust me. He used to say, "He who has the most toys wins." We're in our 20s, and he's like, "He who has the most toys wins." And the best, and his other favorite saying was a Vanessa Williams quote: "The best revenge is success." Those were his two favorite lines. And yeah, he lived those. But not me, because I was just astounded by that the fact that I can't think of the name of that producer right now. Who, again, like I said, one keyboard, one MPC 60, and he was cranking out tracks. And I was like, boy, I've got to get myself scaled down to the point where I'm doing that, because he wasn't sitting down firing up a bunch of keyboards. He wasn't going through his computer, listening through a bunch of loops or whatever. No, he said, "This is what I've got. This is how it works. I know how it works. Let me get to work because I have an idea. I need to do that." And that's where you want to be. That's where you want to be. I'm going to be doing some recording at the beginning of next month. Um, I've slated off the first 2 weeks of October to do some serious recording because I do want to finish my third album that I'd like to put out. Um, uh, uh, Near hits, I think, is the title, working title for that. But um, when I do that, if I fire up this DAW and it's saying on some piece of software that I want to use, I have to update it or do something like that before I can use it, that's going to infuriate me. I don't like that. I want everything to be out. As a matter of fact, I'll set up the session even before I record. I'll turn everything on, get everything set up, and then I'll go have a cup of coffee or watch something, and then I'll come in and start work. Where I sit down, I can immediately start. And you can only do that in a minimalist kind of environment. That's how it works for me. Your mileage may vary. It may work differently from you, but my recording process, and maybe I'll videotape that so you guys can see my process. And I'll bring my pedal board in here. I'll set it up, and and go from there. So, but again, it's an approach. Michael Watson takes very little gear to make good music. Yeah, you know, what's the least amount to get away with making the best sound? Omar, how you doing, brother? Good to have you here, Omar. Good to have you here. Have you ever heard Andy Summer from the Police a long time ago? Yes, Omar. I know Andy Summers playing very. You see, unfortunately, Omar, for me, I'm old. I know I don't look it, but I'm closer to 60 than I'm willing to admit. And then when the Police came out in 1977, my older brother bought that album, and I listened to that in real time in '77 when it first came out. And Andy Summers' guitar playing was phenomenal. When I was younger, I had trouble hanging on to any of my positions. Yeah. I bet I moved a dozen times in less than 2 decades, lost almost everything eventually, young and dumb. No, but that's life too. You don't because you always think, well, I'll let this go, and down the road I can get it back. Sometimes later on down the road, you're like, well, I don't want that. Now you may want something else. Something else may have taken its place, but no, I don't count that because I've lived that myself. I had to let things go because I had to let them go. I had to let my full drum kit go. I had a full drum kit, kids. I had to let it go because I don't have space in this room and nor could I use it either, if I want to continue to live here. Situations change and you have to adapt to them. And, this assumption, this cognitive dissonance that we believe that tomorrow is going to be the same as yesterday or today is one of the other things that I think you should always have in the back of your mind. Yeah, wow, he used a lot of pedaling. Yeah, Andy Summers was one of the first guys that really was into using a lot of tape echo. I had the EP3, that tape echo machine that he used so much. I liked it. It's a great natural echo. He used a lot of things. He was quite innovative. Really, really, really was. I respect him far more than somebody like The Edge, for example. Mike, what was Herbie Hancock's Future Shock album recorded with? That was recorded with the Synclavier. The Synclavier. You guys remember that? There's one for you. That was done with the Synclavier and was that the PCM1? What was that thing? Anyway, he showed it off on Sesame Street. Believe it or not, you can see that on YouTube where he's showing off his keyboard actually on Sesame Street. No lie. Kat says used to work on a piece of pro photography software. One of our main focus points was to not disrupt the workflow with new versions. Great thinking. Yeah, as if companies think that way. Yeah, I know. Omar says, I think there is nothing wrong with using pedals. I just don't like auto tuning when people sing. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with using pedals. I use it again, like I said. I believe that for me, creating this digital analog pedal situation for my recording, since I can't record using amps anymore because of my living environment, just means that that has a useful function for me. And so I wouldn't, I'm not against pedals. Zappa used that a lot. Yeah. Herbie Hancock. Yo, you found it. Did you find it? Is this the one? Yeah. There you go. There you go. Right there. Fairton. It was a Fairlight. So yeah, it was the Fairlight. Sorry, I said the Synclavier. It was the Fairlight. Yeah, dig that, man. Yeah, he was actually on Sesame Street talking about his, the Fairlight. So yeah, that was done on the Fairlight guys, not the Synclavier. No, I remembered the Sesame Street thing because unfortunately, again, in real time, I saw that. I hate to point this out to you because they used to show, I believe this was like, what year was this? Does it say? Um, no, it doesn't say. But uh, yeah, not maybe this was a little bit later, but they used to show Sesame Street in my school when I was a kid. Believe it or not, they used to show us Sesame Street. Wasn't Miles Davis also on Sesame Street? Yeah, a lot of people have been on Sesame Street back in the '70s. A lot, and the '80s. A lot of prominent musicians and actors and people were on Sesame Street. What do you think about Zappa, and why do you not like The Edge? I don't like him either. Because I don't think, again, like I said, it's not a matter of not liking him. I just don't think that he's in as for some people, sure, they do think so, but I just think that he gets a lot actually of his sound from Andy Summer. I don't think he's original. I think that Jesse Johnson is a great guitar player, but I think that he gets a lot of it. It's still a Minneapolis sound, if you understand what I mean. Mr. Hooper, yep, and the Muppet Show, yep. So honestly speaking, guys, minimal is best because of the reasons that I listed. And if you can't understand that, if you can still walk away from this conversation tonight and say, well, I quite don't understand why people think minimalism is good, then you haven't been paying attention, which is all right because I very rarely do myself. But Jesse was a great player, but not a great writer. I agree, Anthony. I don't know. Jesse had a few tracks that I think were good, but they were derivative of the Minneapolis sound. He wasn't adding anything new to the conversation. Whereas his fellow bandmates, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, especially with their productions with Janet Jackson, Human League, um, uh, um, what is that? Gosh, that's that gospel group, Sound of Silence, or if it was Sound of something, I forget the name of them. Each one of those productions had a unique, different sound to it. That was their sound. Alexander O'Neill albums. Jesse's albums sounded like Prince albums. I'm sorry, they just did. Anybody in the chat familiar with JJ Cal? Yeah, me. I'm down his rabbit hole lately. Yeah, you really should. He isn't. Yeah, anyway, I won't get it. That is a rabbit hole. Yeah, yeah. Just again, guys. Don't be sad, be mad about being late to the party. It's so good to discover good old music. I do that on YouTube all the time. I come across cats. I'm like, wow, I don't know who this is. And just check it out. I'm like, oh, that's good. Or band when there used to be. Remember bands? There used to be bands. No, guys. Honestly speaking, it's again my philosophy. It's tied into the I'm good philosophy. I'm good with what I got. I'll be honest with you. I had this. I had to do that deal. The guy wanted a bass guitar too. I sold my bass, my hell, it's a Harley Benton bass with that deal, and I'm minus a bass guitar right now. So I went almost too far. I had to do it because it was money, and I kind of need that. But that I went too minimal. And now I'm in the position where I have to get a bass guitar because I'm going to need it at the end of this month to do some recording with. But don't do that, don't because again, you don't want to be reaching around for stuff that's not there. What you want to do is you want to be reaching around for the stuff that you find familiar. Now, I like that Harley Benton bass so much, I'm going to buy the same exact one. As a matter of fact, I better put the order in on that because that's probably going to take about a week or so to get here. So, and they're cheap, and they work. But again, that is an inexpensive-ish bass, but I know that sound quality of it is as good as any of the Fenders I had. That's a kind of a rare thing, but sometimes you can cut corners like that. But again, the points that I've made, the most important ones is knowing the difference between a design limitations and just cheap. So that'll help you, I think. I don't understand, Omar says, why so many people say Robert Johnson was a great guitar player. He so the devil. He still sucks. Well, Robert Johnson was one of the pioneer bluesmen that a lot of cats like Zeppelin, for example, the Lemon Song came from Robert Johnson, by the way. That's a Led Zeppelin bit from him. I think that they say they're great just to kind of pay them lip service and the fact that later on they ripped them off. I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. I don't like Delta blues. I'll be frank with you. I find it to be more kind of a downer, you know. But when you put on a Robert Johnson album, you know it's Robert Johnson. That's all I can say. Can't say the same thing about Jesse Johnson. I don't have a bass. If I didn't have a bass, I'd get an Alan Woody Rumble Cat. I don't know what an Alan Woody Rumble Cat is. Let me look that up. Alan Woody Rumble Cat. Let me search for that. I'm looking here, sir. Oh, here we go. It's a short scale bass. Interesting. Huh. An Epiphone. Interesting. And they're a little pricey though. Like I said, I can get two of those Harley Benton basses for the price of this one. Uh, Bass is not something that has to. It just has to be functional for me. As long as it stays in tune and sounds good, then I don't care what it says on the headstock. So there's that. I can do it. My sleep blindfold. Good one. Oh my. Anyway, guys, just something to kind of get the conversation going with yourself, asking yourself, you know, looking around this room, what can I get rid of? It may be a good exercise, you know, but always really identify the pieces that are most important to you because there may come a situation out of our control where you have to make that decision. If you haven't made it beforehand, in the and staring at the face of disaster is not the time to be making that kind of decision. So that's the other thing I want you to take away from tonight as well is look at your stuff and decide what is key and what is not. Another small test: if there's a piece of equipment that you haven't played or touched within the last 6 months, then that's something that you need to be putting up for sale because it's something that you're never going to use. So things that you use every day. It's the thing that you count on. That you, when you're recording in your process, whatever your recording process is, that when you reach for those things, they're available and they're working, and you don't need to do a software update on them. So that's kind of the mental approach I'd like for you guys to think of tonight. Gotta go, Anthony. All right, I gotta go too. We're all going. I'm going to wrap this up myself. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to tune in and listen to this discussion tonight. This live stream is. I'm starting. I have a podcast. I don't know exactly how it works, but I do have a podcast here on YouTube. I guess people listen. I actually people are listening to it. I'm amazed. I guess Thus why I've improved my microphone this evening. I'll listen back to the rerun myself of tonight's show and see how the sound is. It should be better now. In any case, thank you guys so much for tuning in. It is indeed a blessing to have so many wonderful people chiming in, keeping this live stream going, or I'm just not sitting here regurgitating facts. I've got people interacting and bringing up excellent points as always. Great audience, great friends. Good to see you guys. God bless you. I hope your week is blessed. I hope that things work out, whatever it is you're trying to work, and I hope that all goes well for you. All right, you guys, take care. Bye bye.